been repeatedly said by some of the critics on this issue on the Hill that the White House provided talking points. That has been categorically refuted, not just by us, but by the intelligence community, and yet it still periodically is said on the air. And it's just wrong. The White House involvement in any changes that were made to the so-called talking points was extremely minimal and non-substantive.
The whole issue of this of talking points, frankly, throughout this process has been a sideshow.
The notion that somehow I or anybody else in the administration misled the American people is patently false, and I think that that's been amply demonstrated.
All right. A newly released email is raising questions now about some of what you just heard, so let's talk about it with our panel. Charles Lane, opinion writer for The Washington Post. Dana Perino, co-host of The Five and Jasper's mom. And syndicated columnist Charles Krauthammer. Good to have you all with us tonight. And Dana, I want to start with you because you've worked inside an administration, inside a White House. You know how things are rolled out. What do you make of this new email that we see? It's from Ben Rhodes, Deputy National Security Advisor, and with the line saying, to underscore that these protests are rooted in an internet video and not a broader failure of policy, talking about prepping Ambassador Rice for the Sunday shows.
Right, so the way a White House works is that you have the communication strategy gets together, figure something out, and then the night before a Sunday show or the day, you talk to the principal involved, make sure you answer any questions, offer suggestions, then the next morning they go on and do the shows, and hopefully you never talk about it again. It's almost 2 years now, and this is deserving of talking about because the question at the heart of all of this is who pushed the video. We certainly know exactly who pushed the video, but the thing that I think is interesting about Ben Rhodes in this case, I don't consider him necessarily the villain. I consider him the messenger, because unless he is the most powerful deputy communications advisor ever in the history of the universe, there is no way that he came up with this strategy on his own. So this email confirms what everybody assumed for a long time, that obviously they were trying to protect the president and possibly Hillary Clinton on a policy and a political standpoint, and now they've been caught out. It's like in that show when the lawyer turned around and he'd say, but there's just one last thing. This is their one last thing, and I think it's professionally repugnant, and you cannot hide behind a suggestion that, well, maybe a reporter didn't ask that specific question. These emails were redacted, sent to the committee, and the only reason that we know about them today is because Judicial Watch actually sued the administration and got the actual document.
Yeah, you're exactly right. Charles, do you think this is a game changer, or as some are saying today, it's just overblown? It doesn't conflict with what the White House has told us thus far, and it's meaningless?
All of those, it's wrong on all of those counts. It is in conflict with what we've been told, with what Jay Carney has been saying, and that is their story has always been this stuff all came from the CIA, from intelligence, so it was completely clean. Now we know from Morell, who testified under oath, he at the time was the deputy director of the CIA, that he never brought up the video, so it didn't come from him. That leaves only the White House and the State Department. We now have the smoking document, which is the White House saying, we're pushing the video because we don't want to blame it on the failure of our policies, which is what anybody who's looked at this assumed all the way through. There before an election, Obama saying, you know, Al-Qaeda is dead, GM is alive, Al-Qaeda is dead. He's running essentially the foreign policy issue on which the whole campaign is based, is one that says that he killed bin Laden, Al-Qaeda's on the run. So this undermines the whole narrative. Therefore, they have to invent the video. So I think this is extremely important. Now, I know what's going to happen. The mainstream media are going to say, oh, it's so complicated, and they're not going to look into this, and without it, it's going to be quite a struggle. I think the Republicans have something here that really ought to be looked at. I just don't know if there's going to be any interest in the mainstream media. They should, because this exposes a cover-up of a cover-up. The fact that it was redacted when the documents were asked for and only revealed by a court order is telling you this is a classic cover-up of a cover-up. And that is a serious offense.
Chuck, what do you think? Do you think the White House is worried about this tonight, or do you think that they think it's not going to get any traction? As Charles said, some will say it's too complicated and connecting the dots and who these players were, and is it truly in conflict with what they've set up to this point? What do you make of it?
Far be it for me to read their minds about how worried they are, but let me, you know, at the risk of being part of the cover-up, let me see if I can offer a non-scandalous explanation for what Ben Rhodes is saying here about underscoring that these are rooted in internet video, not a broader failure. He might have at that time believed that in good faith. He might actually have believed that the video caused it and that there was no failure of policy. Now, of course, the question is, who gave him that idea, right? Who gave him the idea that the video was the cause of the problem? And you're quite correct that Morell has said, I didn't do it. So it must have come from somewhere. This will be resolved, if it's ever going to be resolved, when we find out the ultimate source. Because I do agree with Dana. I don't think Ben Rhodes came up with that idea on his own. But they're not guilty of anything scandalous, in my view, if these talking points were drafted in the good faith belief that the talking points were
But
true.
on the basis of what evidence? The CIA never talked about a video.
That's just what I said.
But
Where did he get the idea?
Well, he either, as you say, invented it or got it from
I didn't
somewhere.
say he invented. Somebody had to give him that idea.
I'm saying he either invented it or got it from somewhere, which means they were creating a cover story. That's the plain meaning of what happened.
Dana, do you think that we'll ever get the answers? I mean, as we've all noted here, the documents that went to the committee that's trying to investigate were so heavily redacted, they never would have been able to ferret this out. It was impossible. This is the result of a lawsuit. Senator Graham, a Republican out of South Carolina, said today, if this isn't a smoking gun, there will never be one, that there was something else going on.
Well, the White House has been given wide deference by the media to give them a lot of rein to say, well, it was complicated, it was difficult. The thing I've never understood is how could any of them have actually believed for 1 second that a video caused the deaths of 4 Americans? How is it in America that we actually put somebody in jail for making a video? It's never been explained, and it was a tale that was swallowed whole by the media. So I think now one of the questions will be, why was it redacted? Who in the counsel's office thought that it was appropriate to redact this information? What and who were they trying to protect? And if it's not Ben Rhodes, then it has to be somebody else, because it's just impossible for me to believe that Ben Rhodes didn't have some sort of direction from somebody. I would never have had the audacity to suggest something like this, which basically was a policy decision to have Susan Rice, to put a cabinet member on the line, lying to the American people, put her out there and put her career on the line without actually having some sort of check-off from a higher up within the White House. I never would have done it.
But that's exactly why I say I don't think Ben Rhodes made up this story. Somebody told Ben Rhodes this was the true story.
Yep.
I find the most scandalous element of this, from purely just a human point of view, is the fact that the Secretary of State, Hillary Clinton, with the bodies of the dead lying in front of her, and with the families there, brought up the video and said a video with which we had nothing to do. And then, according to one of the family members, when she went over to console that family member, she said, we're going to get the guy who did the video. Now that, to me, if she knew that this was a phony story, and I'm not sure I can understand how it would be otherwise, is a form of deception that I think is truly scandalous.
All right. Thank you, panel.